Our circular economy agenda is all about keeping products and materials for as long as possible in the economy, getting the most value out of our resources so that our well-being remains in balance with nature. And as you say, having a vision is not enough. We need to deliver. If we want to build a sustainable economic future while also protecting the environment, we need to turn these goals into actions on the ground.
And our vision is really zero waste packaging to landfill by 2025. This is something which we do believe that we can reach.
The first one is that metal recycling is contributing to reduce the European Union's dependency on imported materials. We could produce only 3% of the primary raw materials we require in order to sustain growing demand. And recycling of metals is also a labor-intensive activity, creating a wide variety of job opportunities for skilled workers. But in the light of the upcoming review of the Packaging and Packaging Waste Directive, a review of the Landfill Directive should also be considered to enhance the circularity of steel packaging by accelerating the phase-out of landfill of recyclable packaging waste. You have already mentioned it in your report, and I fully support the scope, the goal of having such a phase-out at 2025.
We see from the first works under this package that basically more than half of the member states are not going to attain these targets in 2025, and so we want to make recommendations to these countries on how to speed up and what to do in order to improve this performance and to eventually reach the targets. We do realize that there are structural problems also with the packaging itself. So, for example, that's why we are helping member states with this initiative of making everything recyclable, of better separating waste. So these two initiatives, both framework and packaging revision, they are in particular aimed at helping to member states to achieve the current targets.
So this is a call from my point of view to all member states to implement the existing legislation as soon as possible and in a good way, in a best practice way, so that the EPR systems can make the necessary investment together with the waste management sectors. For me, it is important that we uptake more used material, and in a can, whether it comes from a car or from we or wherever, the most important thing is that we reduce the virgin amount, and that all makes sense from a CO2 point of view. I think this is what we have to have in mind in the future as well. If we want to be carbon neutral, we should avoid steps that increase again our CO2 emissions.
We have more than 500 steel plants in Europe, and all the steel plants, they use scrap, post-consumer scrap, collecting from the market. But we have just a few steel players producing tin plate. So it is just not possible to put all the collected tin plate of packaging in plants where tin plate is still produced again new.
We very much are hoping that with the revision of the Waste Framework Directive and even the Landfill Directive potentially, we will see an opening for mandatory sorting before disposal. For steel, it's a great news story because sorting of steel is very cheap. And if we can get integrated systems set up before disposal sites, we can really start to move towards 95-96% of real recycling for steel.
Then one point I also wanted to mention here, and that's something I think where we have to look into a bit closer, and we're doing some innovations already, is collection of steel closures, right? So obviously a lot of our volume is also in glass bottles, and steel closures obviously go with that, right? In a number of markets, and I think for instance in Belgium, it's very clear to consumers what to do with steel closures. In other markets, it's not so clear. And that's why we're also thinking of, and certainly beyond the EU, it's not always clear for consumers how to basically bring these back, how they can be recycled. That's also why we as a brand owner are looking into innovations. For instance, could we have crates where we can have bottle caps collected, etc. So when the bottles get back, then also the steel closures get back. So these are things that we're looking at. And I think based also on the report that I saw from Apeal that was published just this morning, this is something that we can work on together with society and with the stakeholders.
The holistic approach is really needed. You know, if you weren't to have packaging, obviously food would go off much faster. there would be wastage also during the journeys from farm to fork to shelves of the supermarkets. So I just think that from that perspective, from the waste perspective, you need to keep that in mind, that it's not just about the packaging, but it's also about what's inside the packaging.
Let's all live happily, and let's try to make a community and a society and an industry that really values the activity of packaging, which we really do 300,000 times per second, which results in empty packs deliberately somewhere else at a different place, at a different time in the world. Yeah? And therefore, by the design of intended use and by the upfront design, we should already have designed in that this does not result in waste.
We know that there are many different aspects that are relevant for preserving our planetary ecosystem, which ultimately will ensure humanity's survival on this planet. So we're not doing this just for the sake of keeping the forests green and the waters fresh. We're doing this for the survival of the next generations. We have a moral obligation.
So we are really looking forward to the review of the Packaging and the Packaging Waste Directive this year, the Waste Framework Directive, but also the Landfill Directive. And if we want to make that happen, our vision, then we will also have to amend the Landfill Directive. And we have already concrete ideas how to do that.
We fully share the 2025 vision for recycling you announced last year. And your zero steel packaging to landfill approach is absolutely right. Steel is too valuable to be buried in the ground. I very much look forward to involving you in that process as we work towards the changes our citizens demand. Thank you.